Okay, good afternoon. We'll get going in just a second. We'll talk primarily about a state law on housing today. I spent a good part of the day reading some of the testimony on it, reading some of the laws. You have to question when you start looking at laws that are passed and you have a session where 20, 30, 40 different laws are passed, and some people are in person, some people aren't, all this kind of stuff. You wonder how many people actually understand all the details of a law. It's amazing going through this today, and you say to yourself, did all of our legislators actually read this? It's an interesting law because we have overwhelmingly supported by Democrats, but locally, we've had a difference of vote in our local representation as well. So we'll talk about that. To those following the market, really, really good day for Viacom. Viacom is the stock I keep talking about that I love. Here's the reason I love Viacom. Viacom is CBS, the TV station CBS. And stocks fall into a couple different categories. Some are your legacy stocks, the stocks that have been there forever, the GEs of the world, what have you. CBS is very profitable, #1 rated TV show, top rated NCIS, all those kind of shows. Does very well. Secondly, they have a streaming service, a competitor to Netflix, which is Paramount Plus. Just came out last month. Those numbers are very good so far. 3, they have decades of content, Mission Impossible and cartoons and Rugrats and SpongeBob SquarePants is driving subscriptions right now. So you have the kids involved. And 4th, it's also a reopening play. As movie theaters open up, movies from Paramount will come back to the big screen. The Quiet Place 2 comes on the big screen next week. So when I look at stocks, I look at stocks that have multiple different ways to be successful. It's a profitable company. It's a legacy company. I like it. It's also a potential acquisition target. So that's what I look at when I'm looking at that stock. So that's my biggest holding. If you joined me on Palantir a few weeks ago, Ford, you did great. So far, Ford kicking serious butt right now as they transition away from, I don't know if you realize this, but Ford doesn't make cars anymore. Ford got rid of its non-profitable divisions, and that's cars. So Ford is all SUVs or trucks, and they're moving hugely to electric cars. So just how I look at stocks, and when I post something, why I'm buying something, why I like it, I'm primarily what's called a swing trader. I'll buy something and hold it for a few weeks, sometimes a few days, make the money and get out and move on. There's other opportunities. So if you're following that, that's an update there. So let's talk about this law. So this law passed in the state legislature. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go through it with you as if you're looking it up for the first time. So if you're in front of your computer, you can search for these terms with me or these items with me, how I look up a law, how I look at what happened on the law, and then we can read some of the evidence on what the law actually does directly from the source. This law passed in the legislature. We have 2 in Branford representatives that represent us, that's Sean Scanlon and Robin Comey. Sean Scanlon voted for this bill. Comey voted against this bill. I'll tell you now, I would have voted against it. But let's talk about it, and we'll see what you think by the time we get to the end of this. So if you're following along, I'm just going to, first of all, I'm going to, in your Google search, put Connecticut legislature. I'll let that come up. And I'll do it with you. Just CT legislature. Connecticut General Assembly website comes up. Click on that. And on the bottom of the screen is a quick bill search. I might just say bill, click on that, or quick bill search. And this bill number is 6107. So if you want to put that in your search bar, in there it says Bill 2021 number 6107. So if you're following along and you're doing this with me or you're just listening, I'll walk through this. It says an act concerning the Zoning Enabling Act, accessory apartments, training for certain land use officials, municipal affordable housing plans, and a commission on Connecticut's development and future. So a little bit of background is obviously there are groups of people that are pushing for more either affordable housing in a technical term or just cheaper housing to be in towns other than inner cities. The concept is that inner cities have a too much of a collection of poor. There's any types of words you can use, but if you use those words, they attribute it to racism. So I don't want to do that. So very low income housing, we'll put it that way. And it's highly concentrated in the cities. And so the idea is that other towns, Brantford, Guilford, Madison, Greenwich, Woodbridge, what have you, should be doing and taking steps to have more low-income housing or affordable housing in their towns. That concept itself is a whole other concept. I don't necessarily agree with that concept. It doesn't make sense to me when you have high wealth towns that are the high income taxpayers that support the rest of the state. Why would you ever want to devalue any property in that town? But, this is where politics is these days. It doesn't make sense to me. For example, most of the income tax from the state comes from Fairfield County, lower Fairfield County. And so that income tax pays for the school systems in New Haven, Waterbury, Bridgeport, Hartford. Why we suddenly want to start, pushing lower incomes into that town and potentially impact the income tax paid, or the amount of income tax payers that supports the state, makes no sense to me. But that's the law. There's a lot of things wrong with the affordable housing law, but that's not really what we're talking about today. Today we're talking about this bill, what this bill is trying to do. So part of this is, I've just read it, and we'll say below this is now the purpose: to restructure the Zoning Enabling Act for clarity, to promote the purposes of the Federal Fair Housing Act, to provide an administrative mechanism to promote compliance with municipal affordable housing plans, and to require the Secretary of the Office of Policy and Management to convene a working group to study municipal affordable housing plans and zoning regulations. Okay, so introduced by the Planning and Zoning Committee. As you've come down, you can see most of these are in black. That code means this happened 5 days ago. The file from one file is blue from 2 to 4 days ago. What we care about most, and what you all have here, are the text of the bills, the different changes of those texts, the different amendments that were proposed, the different votes that went through, committee actions, fiscal notes. So they are required by law to put a note on what this will potentially cost. What I care the most about is bill analysis. So on the right-hand side, about, a couple strokes of your mouse down, there was a bill analysis for copy 541, but that's in black, so that was a little older one. There was a bill analysis for HB 6701 as amended by House A, and analysis for file copy 716. So you're going to have minor changes in these laws. We'll look at either one of the blues. So let's go to a bill analysis for HB 6701 as amended by House A, and open that. And this is the OLR, the Office of Legislative Research, does this report and breaks down this law. Okay, that's all that's there. So first we have that. Now let's read some. You have the table of contents, and there's some details here, but let's scroll down to the as of right accessory apartments. And it's the first major section of this bill. And this is the one I'm going to have the biggest problem with. Requires municipalities that zone under CGS 8.2 to adopt or amend regulations to allow accessory units, basically ADUs, as of right on the same law as single-family homes unless they follow the bill's opt-out process. Now, we have to explain something here. In zoning, you have, by owning a home, you have some things you can do as of right. Right? You have on a property, you have a right to build a house on that property, depending on the size of it. If it's zoned residential, you have a right to build a residential zone. If the zone allows for multi-unit housing, you have a right to do that. When you have a right to do that, it's implied when you buy the property. You don't have to go to additional planning and zoning approval. You have to get building approvals, but as of right, you have the right to build it. In many cases, there are things listed as special exceptions. So this property has a right to have a store on it, but not any store. Stores up to 2,500 square feet. Anything above that requires a special exception, which means you can possibly have that use, but you have to get approval by planning and zoning, and many of those require a public hearing. When we go away from that special exception and say, as of right, you have it, what we're saying is we no longer need that public hearing aspect of it. And so the simple change of an accessory apartment to as of right is not simple. It's basically saying that somebody can put an accessory apartment in without getting approval from the neighbors or input from the neighbors. That's not a small thing. Let's keep reading. Specifics of these units will not count towards the municipality's base housing stock calculation for purposes of the affordable housing land use approval procedures. Modifies the definition of ADU for purposes of the appeals procedure. Okay, so basically what they're saying is the town has to take its amount of housing units in the town and determine what percentage of those housing units fit under the Affordable Housing Act. Has nothing to do with what they're rented for. They have to be deed restricted, basically funded by the state. They're not allowing accessory units to be used to increase the housing stock, therefore lowering the percentage of affordable housing. That's actually a good thing from a town perspective. Let's read some of the explanation here. Under the bill, an accessory apartment means a separate dwelling unit that is located on the same lot as a principal dwelling of greater square footage, has cooking facilities, and complies with or is otherwise exempt from any applicable building code, fire code, health and safety regulation. So an accessory apartment could be attached or detached from the main unit. The bill specifies that as of right means able to be approved without a public hearing, a variance, special permit, or special exception, or other discretionary zoning action other than determination that a site plan conforms with applicable zoning regulations. So I just said this. By moving it to as of right, you no longer need a public hearing. You no longer need to notify your neighbors. The neighbors do not have a guaranteed right to come forward and issue concerns. That's a problem. That makes no sense to me. Now, there's a whole lot more details in here, and I suggest you go read those, but I want you to scroll down to what you see opt-out process. Now, I'm reading this, but I'm going to check back and see if there's questions or comments on going from here. That Fairfield County residents are mostly New Yorker workers. That may be, but that's who pays income tax. So if you are a Fairfield County resident, you pay income tax for that town. And if you're paying the kind of income tax that these wealthy people are paying, they likely don't want to be next to a unit that's, rented for $1,800 when they're living in a $1.7 million home. So the question is, why would you devalue? If you have property in Greenwich worth millions that attracts multimillionaires to then say, hey, let's go put units in there that are renting for $1,800, doesn't make any sense. That person's not going to pay anything towards income tax that comes close to what the millionaires are going to pay. Why would you impact the high-paying multimillionaires? That doesn't make sense. It's bad business. If you own a sporting goods store, there's a general thing when it comes to business, the 80-20 rule, that 80% of your revenue comes from 20% of the people. Don't mess with the 20%. When you're getting most of your income tax from a small group of people in a small general area, don't mess with that general area. Don't do anything to put that income tax in jeopardy. And that income tax is what pays the ECS money and the money that goes to New Haven and Waterbury and Hartford and Bridgeport. Do we not understand this? Yes, income inequality could yell about all day long, but don't, bite the hand that feeds you. Fairfield County pays a significant percentage of the income tax that comes in. In fact, one or two very wealthy people leaving the state can have a measurable impact on other services we offer. So we can talk about Fairfield County or not, but it doesn't make sense to take property that is the highest potential per acre property in the state, that attracts the highest income earners, that pay the most amount of income tax, that pays for education throughout the state and in the poorer areas, and then say, let's force rents in there in those acres for people that are never going to come close to paying that kind of income tax. That doesn't make sense. It's fundamentally stupid. Generally, the people making these laws are not business people, don't understand the 80-20 rule, but why in the world would you do anything to devalue property in Fairfield County when they're the makeup of the income tax for the state? That makes no sense. Okay, off my little point there. Let's go back to this law. The opt-out process. This is allowing towns to opt out of this aspect. Until January 1st, 2023, the bill allows municipalities, by a 2/3 vote of their zoning commission or combined planning and zoning commission, to opt out of the bill as of right ADU provisions. Okay, so there's a deadline to this. I don't know if that means your opt-out only lasts till then, or you have until then to opt out. I'm not sure. To do so, the municipality's zoning or combined planning and zoning commission must first hold a public hearing on the proposed opt-out, affirmatively decide to opt out within the statutory time limit, which is 65 days after the hearing. So if they have a public hearing to talk about opting out of this, they have 65 days to take a vote, state in the record the reasons for its decision, and publish that notice. Now, here's a key line. The bill requires the opt-out to be confirmed by a 2/3 vote of the municipal legislative body, or if it's a town meeting, the Board of Selectmen. Now, Branford, for example, doesn't have a town meeting. It has a representative town meeting. So a town meeting is where anybody can go vote. Representative town meeting, we have representatives. So our legislative body is the representative town meeting. So this provision allows accessory apartments to be started, built, whatever. Now, an accessory apartment means a single family house is there. They could build a second house that's smaller, have double, triple the cars, whatever. They could be family or not. They could rent it out for whatever they want to. Another unit can go on your neighbor's property. By making it as of right, you don't have a say. There's no guaranteed public hearing anymore. It cannot be per approval or special exception. As of right, when they buy that property, they have a right to add a second accessory unit, basically a second home. You don't have a say. If the town doesn't like that, they can opt out of that rule by going through these steps. So the planning and zoning can say, we're going to have a public hearing. People will come and say, we don't like this rule. They write it up, they take a vote, and they want to get rid of the rule. But then it requires a 2/3 vote of the municipal legislative body. So I don't know what town you're listening from. Excuse me. But if you're from Branford, that's the representative town meeting. Excuse me for a second. The representative town meeting is made up of Democrats and Republicans, and Branford is 30 people. To get to a 2/3 vote, you need 20 members. No one party has 20 members. So whether you're Democrat or Republican, this is a stupid rule. This law is stupid. Making accessory apartments as of right on any property is stupid. It's just dumb. It doesn't really help anything either. The idea of getting more affordable living just doesn't make any sense. This is not going to help that problem, that issue. That's it. And also, it doesn't do anything to help the residents of the town because there's no way to stipulate who moves there, who doesn't. It's not going to be listed as affordable housing. It's a nonsense aspect here. Somebody had this idea that if we allow accessory units, they'll be cheaper, and therefore, people can live there less expensively. That's just stupid. But so they push this law, it passes. In order for this exception to take place, planning and zoning has to approve the exception, which they'd probably do. It's a stupid law. And then go to legislative body. And if the legislators on the RTM, at least 20 of the 30 don't vote for it, it doesn't pass. So this isn't a law that you say the town can opt into and decide to have. This is a law the town, they say you have to have it unless you opt out. Here's what would happen in Branford. The Democrats would certainly not vote to eliminate this. This is kind of their thing. And there's not enough Republicans to kill it. So you would end up having this law in place no matter what planning and zoning said. This is really bad legislation. The idea is bad. The concept is stupid. You're not going to solve any problem. No more people are going to have housing. If people are building accessory housing, they're going to be very selective who lives next to them on their own property. You want to play a game on, you think what inner city people are going to move out here? Give me one person who has their family live in a house, going to build an accessory unit behind it, and then say, oh, look, you're from Fairhaven? Sure, no problem. You think it's going to happen? Race, not, doesn't matter. Do you think that's going to happen? That's never going to happen. This law doesn't do anything productive. Now, there's far more involved in this law. And I'm not going to go through it all now. We'll talk about it a little bit more tomorrow. If you have questions on it, you can ask those. But there's other things in here that simply don't make sense. And we could scroll down, keep going. Housing stock calculation. This is an interesting, if you keep going down, scroll down. And it talks about consideration of character. They remove that. You cannot use that as a reason for denying something. But I'm going to go a step further. If we keep going down, options promoting. Okay, so it's section 8-2, section 4. If you find this, section 4, and it's regulating mobile manufactured homes, mobile homes. If you wonder why this impacts Brantford, Brantford has one of the largest concentration of mobile homes in the state. They're hidden well, but they exist. So here's what it says. The bill prohibits zoning regulations adopted pursuant to CGS A2, Connecticut General Statutes, and CGS, from imposing on manufactured homes, including mobile homes, built to federal standards and with the narrowest dimension of 22 feet or more, conditions that are substantially different from those imposed on single-family dwellings and associated lots, multifamily dwellings, or lots with multifamily dwellings, cluster developments, or planned unit developments. Under current law, manufactured homes and lots cannot be treated substantially differently from single-family dwellings and lots with single-family dwellings. Additionally, manufactured home developments cannot be treated substantially differently from multifamily dwellings or lots with multifamily dwellings, cluster developments, or planned unit developments. The bill removes references to manufactured home developments. So basically, we're putting more stipulations to do nothing to prevent the establishment of more mobile homes. I don't think there's some massive demand for mobile homes. Why this is spectacular to me is they're doing this to protect mobile homes, but will not let towns count mobile homes in the affordable housing calculations. So despite being one of the largest concentration of mobile homes, hundreds of mobile homes, we don't count it as part of our affordable housing calculations. We're not allowed to. A few years back, there was Ryder Park, I believe in Milford. A law was, because of that law in particular, a law passed that allowed some people to count mobile homes if the mobile home was on owner occupied property. The problem with mobile homes is very rarely does the mobile home owner actually own the property. They own the home, but not the underlying property. They pay rent. They pay fees for that. So none of our property in Brantford is considered owner occupied, and therefore isn't counted. So you're adding more stipulations about mobile homes, but you're not changing the fact that we can't count them. Affordable housing, mobile homes? Yeah, they are. No question about it. We don't get to count them. This law is dumb on every single level. Not just this law, the affordable housing law is dumb. It hasn't worked. That's why they keep trying to change aspects of it. It doesn't work. It's a stupid law. Quite frankly, not everybody can live everywhere. I would much rather, and I've beaten a dead horse, spend all the money on this affordable housing law and all the money we're giving to giant corporations like Beacon to build units and say, let's teach people to save money, start them with investment accounts, start them with savings accounts, and teach them how to do it. Teach them how to get ahead, how to afford a better living. But instead, it feels good to a bunch of nonprofit groups, people who make a living on this, to call us racist and sexist and awful people if we're not for this. We're not for this because so far the law hasn't worked, and these nonstop amendments to the law aren't going to work either. They don't do anything. They don't help those most in need. And this rule, this law, to circumvent local zoning, to say that your zoning board doesn't know well enough, the local people don't know well enough, does a couple things. One, it makes the local election very imperative. If you're a homeowner and you don't want to give up your right to have a say on your neighbors building accessory apartments in their property, ask that question in election season. So I'll tell you right now, if there's 20 Republicans on the RTM, that will never pass. Don't get the exception to it. If there's not, you have to hope some Democrats do it. And based on the behavior of this group of Democrats, I don't see that happening. And based on them statewide, I don't see that happening. And I think there's Democrats and Republicans that give a damn about property rights. There's a reason you've chosen to live in Brantford, despite our mobile homes and affordable housing already being here. So the law makes no sense. It's comical. I'm going to suggest that you go and read the rest of it. They have more training for zoning enforcement officers. Basically, that's code for we're going to push them to support affordable housing. More training for planning and zoning. Basically, that's code for we're going to teach them more about affordable housing. This is basically pushing the idea that towns need to not just say we'll allow affordable housing, but we want affordable housing. And the problem with this, the issue I'll have with Sean Scanlon, who voted for this, and the kudos I'd have for Comey, is that the definition of affordable housing is idiotic. That affordable housing can only be counted if it's deed restricted is idiotic. We have a ton of housing in Brantford that fits the financial stipulation of affordable housing, of the legal definition of affordable housing. But we don't have affordable housing with those financial limits that are considered deed restricted, which means you can never change the price that you, or the price relative to the median income you'd have. So basically, if the rent is $1,000 now, you can raise that as a percentage of the median income. But is a $1,000 rent going to go to $2,000 at Brantford? Probably not, unless they strike gold in the back. It's not going to happen. But no property owner is going to voluntarily deed restrict their property. So there might be plenty of units that are $1,000 or $1,100 that fit the affordable housing stipulation, but because they're not deed restricted, we don't get to count them. We have mobile home parks all over Brantford that certainly have people under the income limits of affordable housing, but we don't get to count them. So before you pass a bunch of laws trying to address the affordable housing law, change the definition of affordable housing. If you still want it to be 30% of the median income goes to your housing, I'm fine with that. The deed restricted aspect of it, the funded by the state aspect of it, get rid of it, because we're not playing with real numbers here. In towns like Brantford that are very much middle income and have wealthy areas and poor areas in the same town become targets for this idiotic and stupid law. Now that you've seen how we find out about this, go through this process on a regular basis. When you find a law that you want to discuss, you can send it to me, I'll discuss it, or you want to look it up, go to the Connecticut Legislature page, put the number in, and look at the OLR reports, the Office of Legislative Research. And those are breakdowns of what the law does. I can't believe this law passed. I'm kind of shocked Scanlon voted for it. Proud of Comey for voting against it. Next time we have Scanlon on, we will absolutely ask him about it. And that's probably sooner rather than later. There's a lot to talk to him about, especially with Tweety, which is all good. That said, this law is crazy. And let's hope that changes. Frank, pay living wages. What does that mean, Frank? I love these general statements, pay living wage. What's a living wage? Can anybody explain what a living wage is? Now, we had a long conversation about this last week, right? We broke down, there was an MIT study, living wage changes based on how you're supposed to live. But if I said to a 22-year-old kid, is a living wage require you to have your own apartment and a new car payment and the rest, or does a living wage require you to have a roommate and a used car? Now, what is the standard of living that the society is supposed to tell you? $16 an hour. So $16 an hour is a living wage. $16 an hour for a single person is what? $640 a week? Is that correct? Yeah, about 600 or in that ballpark. So $640 a week. Is that right? Why am I not getting this right? Yeah, I think it's about $640 a week. $640 a week. That's not going to pay for an apartment, a car, insurance, or whatever for a single person in a million years. So how is that a living wage? Living wage for who? Family of three? Single person who lives home? What's a living wage? I'm not asking this to be a jerk. Guys, these bumper sticker statements, we need to pay a living wage. 15 an hour is only because that's what politically we're talking about. It doesn't make any sense. You know, I worked, I don't know, since I was 15 at Taco Bell. And I was paid, I think, $6.40 an hour. Now I lived at home. I didn't have a living wage. I made more money, had more expendable cash than people who don't live at home. What quality of life are we required as a society to make sure everyone has? Explain that. Are we also supposed to make sure that anybody who wants to live in Greenwich can live in Greenwich? Are we supposed to assure that too? Are you supposed to be able to pay for your house, have a new car payment, or are you supposed to have a roommate and a used car? Which one is it? What's the standard? Can someone please explain what the standard is? Because we yell these bumper sticker crap. We have to pay a living wage. What's the standard? What is a living wage? If someone decides not to go to college and they never want to further their career and they want to work at a grocery store, is it the requirement of that job to pay for them to have a career the rest of their life and have new cars and vacations and sick days and to be able to live on their own? Is that a requirement? What as a society do we consider to be a living wage, and for who? If that sounds rhetorical, it is, because there's no answer to it. It's political nonsense that we throw that stuff out there. It's bumper sticker politics. Listen, I want to give my little speech, and so Maria's right. The standard living wage is very different. But again, even there, before we get to the number of minimum wage, what's the standard? Should somebody at 18, when they get out of high school, should every single job they have allow them to have their own apartment, pay for a new car, have a vacation every year? Is that what we're asking for? Is that the American dream? Because the American dream that I know was you may start out low, but you learn, you get ahead, you bust your ass, you save money, you learn to invest, and all those things come to you. And let me tell you a secret. That still works. You show me an 18-year-old who doesn't want to go to college and instead goes into the electrical union and busts their ass, they'll have everything. You show me an 18-year-old who goes to McDonald's and busts their ass and works up the management program, and they'll get ahead. They'll get that American dream. At the end of the day, the question here, Frank just said nobody is saying your American dream. I'm not saying my American dream. What is as a society, what is a living wage? What is the standard the wage is supposed to meet? At 18 years old, we paid for your education. We got you through high school. We'll pay for you to go to Gateway. If you're especially low income, Gateway is basically free. And even if you have to borrow something when you get out, it's not cost prohibitive by any means. So let's just say at 18, what quality of life should society demand you can have? Nobody can answer this question. Because nobody actually wants to say that an 18-year-old should be able to walk out there, get an apartment for $1,200, $1,300, go buy a new car, have their vacation, have the life that we all worked for 20 years to get at 18 years old. There's an expectation that they go to school and they apply themselves and they work. So we don't want to give them a living wage at 18. We want them to work for a living wage. So at what age do we think their living situation is now an acceptable living wage? There's no answer to this question. And my point is that we say these stupid bumper sticker sayings over and over and over again without knowing what we're talking about. And yes, $15 in Alabama. If you are a married couple in Alabama and each of you makes minimum $15 an hour, $15 an hour is what? $600 a week, $600 a week times 52, that's $30,000 a year. Both of you combined have an income of $60,000 a year. That puts you about 20% over the median income in Alabama. Minimum wage here, if it's national, you would be well above the median income in Alabama. So that begs this question. Does living wage mean it's a living wage here? If somebody graduates Branford and we say to them, listen, we're paying you $15 an hour, and if you want a good life, you should move to Alabama. Should people be able to live wherever they want? I can't afford Greenwich, but should I have that option of going to Greenwich without having to work harder at minimum wage? You got to answer some serious questions before you start yelling bumper sticker politics. Bumper sticker politics is bullshit. It's great. It sounds great when riling up your base. It sounds phenomenal when riling up your base. But all the unions that built the middle class, and you could talk about union laws and all those other things, but the unions built, you know how they made money? A little secret. They had money from their paychecks taken out and invested in the market, and they got up every single day and went to work. We talk about generational worth. Your grandfather got up every single day and he went to work and he left his kids a property and some money. And those kids had a leg up. And they went every day and they invested and they worked and they had some money saved and they gave their kids some money. Didn't happen overnight. They did it by working their ass off, whether they're educated or not. And by, even without them knowing it, money was taken from their paycheck, set aside and invested. Social Security. We have Social Security because people didn't know how to save money. Even people who don't make a lot of money get Social Security. It's not enough, granted. Teach people to work hard, get ahead, save, and invest. Work hard, save, and invest. Work hard, save, and invest, and repeat. I'm trying to lose weight, right? I've talked about this many times on the podcast. And the realization I came to is stop thinking about it. Get up every day, get on the damn treadmill, go to the park, lift some weights, just do it. We can talk about a living wage all day long and what you think you should have. The people who actually have a living wage got up, worked hard, saved, and invested. Or whether they made $10 an hour or $1,000 an hour, they got up, they worked hard, they saved, and invested. So before you come to me and say, what is a living wage? Understand the difference between Alabama and Connecticut and what $15 means for Alabama and Connecticut, what $15 means for the cost of goods in Alabama versus Connecticut, what it does to supply and demand in Alabama versus Connecticut. And then ask yourself this: what is the quality of life, the minimum quality of life anybody who's working should have? Is it live alone in a house? Is it live alone in an apartment? Does it have roommates? Is it you decide? Get an answer to that first. Period. Maria, yep, worked 3 jobs for many years with a roommate, used car, no vacation, no frills, paid my way through college. Yeah, even now, buying a car is stupid in many cases. Have a used car. The discussion should be about grit, perseverance, and work ethic before worrying about dollar amounts. This affordable housing law is all about this idea that people who don't have opportunities, people whose families' kids go to school in New Haven, for example, would have a much better opportunity to get ahead if they went in Branford or Madison or Guilford. I don't necessarily disagree with the concept, but the same thing remains true no matter where you go to school. The amount of work you put in, your work ethic, is going to make the difference for you. That comes from your parents. Now, we can't pretend for a second that there are people who don't come from awful situations. I have seen it. I've seen awful situations in Branford and Guilford, but in New Haven, in the inner cities in Fairhaven, there's many people. There's no parents, there's no fathers, there's no mothers. There's just awful, truly awful situations. And we all wish we can take some of those kids out of those situations. I'd rather see a better plan to educate them in those areas. Is there an easy way to do that? No. Is the affordable housing law the right answer? No, it's not. And I could tell you why. We just gave $20 million to Beacon to build 60 units. With that $20 million, we could have gone down to New Haven and bought tutors for every kid in that district and helped them, and guidance counselors, and increased everything we can do in resources for those kids. Even more so, we could have gone pre-COVID, there was a big bump with COVID, gone to half our condominium complexes and bought, instead of 60 units, 90 or 100 condos, two-bedroom condos, and moved those families here in much better living conditions, if that was the answer to the problem. It's not the answer. This law doesn't make sense. There's a lot of people making a lot of money because of this law. Beacon's making a lot of money. There's developers making a lot of money. There's nonprofits that are getting huge grants because of this law. So they are always going to yell and scream. If you don't for this, you're racist. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make economic sense. There's no mathematical numbers that make sense in this law. And so instead of getting rid of the law and starting over or finding another solution, we do amendments to a law. We put that amendment forward and say, this is better. And if you don't support this, you're racist. Well, congratulations to Robin Comey, who didn't support it. Kudos to her. Sean has to answer why he supported it. And I suggest all of you go back and read this law yourself, read the OLR report yourself, see what's in the law. I read it to you verbatim. Didn't make this up. Before this is a Democrat versus Republican thing, a Democrat voted for it and a Democrat voted against it. That's the law. You decide if you want to move to a neighborhood knowing that your neighbor at any time could build a second house on their property. You decide if that's okay for you. And to those Democrats that live on the private roads and the multi-million-dollar neighborhoods and all that kind of stuff, yeah, okay, shut up. I don't care. If you live on a private road and you're telling me how I should live, shove it. But for the rest of us, that's the question. So it's one thing to move to a neighborhood next to an empty lot, and you're there for 10 years, and eventually somebody builds. They have a right to build. You knew that going in. You benefited from not having anything for 10 years, but they have a right to build, right? That's there. Maybe not a huge mansion, but build within the law. To single-family homes, suddenly you go there and the law changes and they can put accessory units behind it. Because not for nothing, these single-family homes become massive investment opportunities for wealthy people, because I'm going to buy every single home I can do that's on a large lot and build a second one. It's an accessory apartment. It's an accessory home. Has a kitchen. It's smaller than the main home, so it's an accessory home. Congratulations. Republican or Democrat, you for that? You tell me. All right. That's how we analyze laws. That's how we look at reports. All that information is available to you. That's not a privilege. It's not just to legislators, not just to journalists. That's available online. When a law is proposed, there are fiscal reports done, what will it cost, and research on the actual impacts. That's available to you online. Just Google Connecticut Legislature. It'll take you right to the Connecticut Legislature page, put in the bill number, and all that information is right there. Make it a habit of researching that stuff when you're talking about laws. Okay, guys, have a great night. It's beautiful outside. I'm going to get a workout in. I will see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a good night.